Hey, what's going on YouTube? Today I'm going to be talking about my on-hit lightning build that has been running through empowered monoliths now. It's doing quite well, and I've been having a lot of fun with it. As far as I can tell, I kind of came up with this idea on my own, except for the fact that Dragorath's Claw I did discover through a different build idea, just discovering the item itself and how it works. But for the most part, the rest of the idea has come straight from the noggin, but I'm sure somebody else has already done it. But I did want to go over my version and kind of explain how it works and process between leveling to getting to empowered monoliths and how to get there and how to make your build kind of function through the game so that you can then get to the point where this build is at and play for yourself. So when it comes to leveling, the on-hit lightning build in particular, there's a lot of setup involved in the late game, and there's some items that you need to make the build function. And so getting there's a few steps and changes you have to make. To start, the skills when you're first leveling out should not be what you're seeing here. Instead, we should be using Mana Strike plus Glacier for the first like 20-25 levels until you can get Frostclaw kind of up and going. But you're going to want Mana Strike and Glacier. And when you're leveling through the campaign, and I was using this up until about level 45 in the campaign, I was using a two-hander because it is the most base damage you're going to get out of Mana Strike and allowing for Mana Strike to deal the most damage. And so I was using a two-hander for most of the campaign, and then I swapped over to a dagger once I got a decent dagger, and then eventually swapped over to Dragorath's Claw, and that's when I made another skill change, and I'll go over how that works. So let's start with campaign leveling. For campaign leveling, obviously you're going to want Mana Strike. Now, for Mana Strike, it should be your first mastered skill even when leveling, and you're just going to want to get up to teleporting strikes and Star Guide as soon as possible. So that means 2 points in a Swift Sap, 2 points in a Rage Sap, and then teleporting strike Star Guide. Once you're here, then you want to focus on getting some mana on hit. So we'll go 1 point into Sprite Blade and then 2 points into Mana Drain. And then we're going to go over to this side of the tree and we're going to take Arcanist Blade and Mana Storm and then take 2 points into Explosive Flurry. And that way we can kind of better afford to cast Mana Storm, because you'll notice when you take Mana Storm, not only do you get an insanely good DPS upgrade, but you will also notice that your mana expenditures are quite high and can be hard to manage. And so I'll go over how we're actually managing most of that. And then lastly, you'll focus on taking Mana Spark and then Spark Charges, Celestial Precision, and critical mana once your crit's good. Critical mana should probably be the last thing you take, but I will tell you there's something weird with the skill. Arcanist Blade says when Mana Strike attacks an enemy or hits an enemy, it grants you more mana and it grants you +3 mana gained, right? And then critical mana says the same thing, except it's for critical strikes. You gain 3 mana on crit. I've noticed that it must be the way that Mana Strike gives you mana, because I'm telling you, critical mana was giving me more mana than Arcanist Blade. I noticed I was able to have my mana stay at perfect upkeep. No, like, my mana never like hit zero with the setup. It always stayed at full mana. But when I swapped it to Arcanist Blade, it was actually going down a little bit. So I don't know if there's a difference here. My only idea is that maybe Mana Strike returns me a certain amount of mana over time or something, and it's not like exactly as soon as I strike the target, whereas critical mana is as soon as I strike the target. The alternative could be that this is giving me 3 mana per cast of Mana Strike, whereas critical mana is giving me 3 mana per crit on the attack, right? So maybe this is giving me 3 mana per swing, but if I hit 4 or 5 enemies with critical mana, it's giving me 15 mana per swing. You know what I mean? So I'm not positive, but I'm telling you, critical mana is giving me more mana than the regular Arcanist Blade. I'm not sure why. It might just be a placebo, but you could just take a second point into Arcanist Blade instead of critical mana if you're struggling with crit. And yeah. Anyways, that's kind of the Mana Strike tree. For Glacier, you're never going to really put this into your skill bar. You're just going to run Glacier as a way to deal damage early on, because Mana Strike is pretty lousy when it comes to single target damage or just like damage in general. And if you pair Glacier with Mana Strike, it's a good way for you to get Glacier up constantly, because Mana Strike's going to give you plenty of mana back. You can cast Mana Strike while at negative mana because it costs 0 at a base value. So Glacier will basically have full uptime in that scenario. And so, yeah, that's a really good setup. Good for the first early levels. But eventually you're going to want to take Frostclaw. And Frostclaw has cool skill called Makawaddle, which allows you to basically cast Frostclaw on melee hit so that you don't actually have to solo cast it or self cast it. It will cast off of your Mana Strike, and then the whole skill functions based off of that. We're never hard casting Mana Strike or Frostclaw. So you want to rush these 3 points, which means we go 2 points here, 1 point here, and then 3 points here. And then once we have the 3 points here, we'll then want to go up and take Spark Artillery so that we can transition all the damage to lightning. That's going to be a crazy good damage upgrade. And then lastly, we'll take Volley of Glass. We'll go down to Volley of Glass, and then we'll take Glamdring and Rending Cascade as our last skills once we get to the end of the tree. So these are like the last points you want to take, starting with Glamdring, ending with Rending Cascade. And so most of our damage is coming from Frostclaw. It's actually most of our damage ends up coming from Lightning Blast, but not until after we get Dragorath's Claw. So I'm going to explain what you do before you get Dragorath's Claw, because you're most likely not going to find it during the campaign. So if you don't have it during the campaign and you've gotten to a point where your Frostclaw is self-casting, instead of taking these 7 points on Rending Cascade and Glamdring, you're going to want to go up to Celestial Conflux and take the Elemental Nova cast chance. And then instead of, well, first of all, you want to take Flame Ward 4th, and then you want to take Elemental Nova 5th. More than likely, you won't be able to actually have Elemental Nova casting until you're around level 50. But you could instead take it 4th and take Flame Ward 5th. I ended up taking it 4th and taking Flame Ward 5th. But like I said, it might take a while until you get to that point where you can do that. So what you'll do is, instead of taking Lightning Blast here, you'll take Elemental Nova, because we'll have Elemental Nova being casted off of Frostclaw instead of Lightning Blast. So you can then level up Elemental Nova. What I liked to do and what I did for the tree on Elemental Nova is go Lightning Nova, and then we go 1 point here, 1 point, or 3 points here, 4 points here. And then I go 2 points and then 3 points. And then I get 2 more points in overcharge and then 4 more points in spark charges. It ends up being that you can, it's basically all 20 points go 5, 10, 14, 15, right? So that's 15 points. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is the last 5. So that's 20 right there. And that's your Lightning Nova. But eventually you do want to swap off Lightning Nova to Lightning Blast once you get Dragorath's Claw, so that we can use Dragorath's Claw effectively. But let me go over Enchant Weapon here. Enchant Weapon's going to be your 3rd skill. It's a great DPS increase during the campaign, and it's also fantastic as just a standard skill throughout the entire game. It does exactly what we want it to do. So it gives us a ton of melee attack speed. It's giving us some shock chance. It's giving us a passive zap, and then we're going to get a lot of added melee lightning damage while it's active. And then we're going to want to take some active duration so that we can make it last longer. And that's basically what Enchant Weapon's doing. When Enchant Weapon's active, I'm basically dealing double damage. It's very powerful damage buff. I cast it as often as it's available, but again, it's something more so important for bossing. You don't really need to cast it during mapping or during echoing, but for bossing, you're gonna want to cast it. And then for our Flame Ward, which is what you should be taking 4th, I did it out of order, but I do think Flame Ward you should take 4th because it's a great defensive tool. You're going to want to rush to double charge. So you take 2 points here, and then 1 point, 2 points, and then you get your double charge. And then you're going to want to max out Barrier, and then take 2 points to Prismatic Buffer, 2 points to Energize, and 3 points to Dilation. And then with the last 2 points, you can put another point into Prismatic Buffer and another point into Stalwart Defense. And that will finish up your Flame Ward tree. For Lightning Blast, we want to max out Front Loaded. We want that single target damage to go up. and we're not chaining really at all. So it's just almost basically just a flat 100% damage increase. And then we go for Spark Charge on hit, and then we get Spark Charge detonation, and then we take Spark Charge additional damage. We're actually doing a lot with Spark Charges, and I'm going to explain something in the gear later, but Spark Charges is significantly important. So taking all the points here, and then we want to go down to the bottom end of the tree, and we're taking Storm Razor for some extra base crit and damage, and then some additional chains. This is going to increase the mana cost. It has not been an issue for me. And then we want to change to Convergence, and basically what this is doing is it's going to make it so that we're only chaining once, but that chain is going to deal basically double damage. And then I have Divergence, which is just adding 2 flat lightning damage, and then they can fork or chain. The forking doesn't really do anything, but it is just added flat damage. Alternatively, you can take this point out and add more base crit and damage to Storm Razor, but I will tell you, you won't have a problem critting with the skill as long as you're res capped with a Dragorath's Claw. But you can alternatively get rid of Divergence and add Storm Razor, and that's kind of the passives. So yeah, like I said, when leveling, you want to focus on getting Mana Strike first, and with Glacier, and then once you get Frostclaw to a point where it's 3 points here and self-casting quite often, you can drop Glacier and you won't have to worry about Glacier, and then you can start focusing on Enchant Weapon and Elemental Nova. And then once you get Dragorath's Claw, you swap Elemental Nova to Lightning Blast, and you're always going to want to take Flame Ward, of course. Now for the passives are pretty straightforward. All we're going to want to be doing is taking 8 points into Arcanist first, and then we're going to want to take, I think it was like 3, maybe it was only 2 points. How much does this require? It requires 10 points. Yeah, so I took 2 points into Reactive Ward, and then I took 5 points into Mage Flurry, and then you're going to want to take the last 4 points into Reactive Ward, and then you're going to want to take 5 points into Warden, and then to get over to Silver Rune, 3 points into Silver Rune, you got to take 1 point in Knowledge of Destruction, and then we'll get the 3 points into Silver Rune, and that will finish off the first tree. And then we're going to go to Spellblade. Now for Spellblade, we're going to take 6 points into Elemental Affinity first, and then 8 points into Infused Weapons second, 5 points into Arcane Shielding, and then to get over to here, we got to take 1 point into Arcane Warden. So we'll take that 1 point. And then we're going to take 5 points into Stormblade, 1 point into Shattered Aegis. With my additional points, I will be putting them into Shattered Aegis. This is a last pick option. You do not want to use this until you are past level 80. So don't level this until you're past level 80, but you will get to a point where you're going to want to put points into Shattered Aegis. It is crucial to get Mana Reaver as soon as possible, and then Prismatic Blade after that, and then you get some Burden of Knowledge added flat spell damage. We get reduced cast speed, but it doesn't matter because all of our spells are cast on hit, so the cast speed is based off of a chance on our attack, so it does not matter what our cast speed is. So that's just an added flat 20 damage basically. And then for the Sorc side of things, we're just going to want to take 8 points into Calculated Destruction, 8 points into Mana Shell, 4 points into Seratomancer, and then 5 points into Rift Bolt. Getting this 15 Lightning Pen and Life Leech is quite powerful, so it's worth pushing over to this area. But also the mana and armor is very good off Mana Shell, and Calculated Destruction, of course, Int is doing a great deal of work for our build, but this also gives us extra spell crit per 3% intelligence, so very easily maxes our spell crit. And that's the passives. We don't really want to touch Rune Master, but if you do find yourself, basically what I'm going to probably end up doing is I am currently level 84, so I'm going to spend getting up to 88, getting to Shattered Aegis to max, and then I'll have 12 points left, right, to 100. My last 12 points will probably go into 8 points in Sphere Protection, and then 4 points into Seratomancer, and that'll be it. That'll be the tree. In the description, I'm going to leave a few Last Epoch tool planners, and they're going to be like, I'm going to have one for leveling, I'm going to have one for early game gear, and then mid game gear, and then late game gear, and what I'm aiming for. Like currently my gear is decent, but it's not exactly what I want. For instance, this catalyst, although powerful, I actually want Fragment of the Enigma, as that is going to add a considerable amount of damage to the spark charges I'm applying. And because we're applying so many spark charges, it makes a lot of sense to be running Fragment of the Enigma and then running like getting crit multi maybe on the legendary potential. If I get legendary potential, I just haven't found the item yet. It's supposedly pretty common, so it's not something I should be struggling to find, but I have been struggling to find it. And so I've been using a crit offhand catalyst in replacement, but this should be a Fragment of the Enigma once you get to it. But any offhand crit chance, crit multi catalyst will do with, you know, filling out your res or whatever. For your chess piece, you're definitely going to want to get tier 5 mana strike and tier 5 int. The plus 2 points to mana strike, although not crucial, are very good. And I highly suggest getting tier 5 mana strike on your chess piece, and then getting int as your second prefix, and then your bottom affixes. I have increased health. You don't actually need it. It would probably actually be better to have ward per second. As you can see down here, I'm working currently on another chess piece. I ended up Glyph of Despairing tier 4 int on a tier 6 dexterity chess piece. So I was going to wait until I got 5 mana strike levels and then try my best to get the 5 mana strike affix crafts and get that tier 5 mana strike onto here, and then maybe try to get a little extra ward per second. But yeah, I was focused on ward per second for the body armor, so that's probably what you should actually have instead of increased health. And then I had just Fizz res because I had like 2 forging potential left, and I figured I just need a way to fill out the last of my forging potential. So I was like, all right, I'm just gonna throw some Fizz res on there and see what happens. Obviously you're gonna want Dragrat's Claw for the claw, but if you don't have this, you're gonna want to run any like solid rare dagger. So this is what I was using in the campaign, and you can ignore the sealed affix, the chance to shred armor, but instead of having chance to blind, it should probably be chance to shred armor. So basically you're going to want just a rune dagger, so something that's giving you melee damage and spell damage, and then a good flat crit. And then you're just going to want crit multi, crit chance, and then for the bottom 2 mods, the suffixes, you're going to want frailty and shred. And then Dragrat's Claw will eventually replace it, but in the meantime, something like this is pretty good. You can also consider doing a moon dagger, and a moon dagger gives you just more flat melee lightning damage, so it'll kind of nerf your spells but enhance your mana strike, so kind of a matter of preference, I guess, in that scenario. And of course, before you get to a point where you feel good transitioning to a decent dagger, you're just going to want to run 2-handers. I was running like very lousy 2-handers throughout the campaign, and I was still blasting pretty hard. I'm still using my campaign helmet. I'm trying to work on swapping off this helmet. This helmet is not great. And then my amulet is just a lightning pen, crit multi, health, and some extra resistances. I sealed away necrotic damage in order to basically nullify the modifier and get rid of it and give me open space. That should give you an idea of what you should be looking for an amulet. Now, keep in mind, I'm far into the end game, so these are just, I'm giving you an idea of what the mods should look like, but you definitely don't need something so good. And again, down in the description, there will be some early leveling gear options to look at so that you kind of know what your build should look like as you're going through the campaign. But this is stuff to aim for, I guess, once you get there. Spider Silk Sash is insane. So we're taking Spider Silk Sash with mana regen and lightning damage, and then filling out some resistances if we need to. And then if you don't need resistances down here, which I actually don't anymore, you're just going to want to go for anything that seems good, honestly. I think like, well, let me look at the belt options. But as far as I can tell, I mean, maybe health and hybrid health is your best bet, or endurance is really good too. Cooldown recovery is not terrible, but it's not great. But yeah, I'd probably focus on taking endurance, honestly, with hybrid health, or you could even go for like armor with reduced bonus crit. Of course, we are getting pretty much fully crit strike avoidance, so the reduced crit hybrid doesn't really do anything. As you can see here, I'm pretty sure, yeah, I'm 97% crit strike avoidance right now, so not a big deal. For our gloves, we're just going to want melee attack speed and some crit chance. And then the suffixes, again, fill out your defenses however you see fit. Going for armor or resistances is good. I am now just noticing I have 214% necrotic resistance. That is insane. For boots, int and move speed. And then again, for the bottom mods, you're just going to want armor, health, and then some ward decay threshold on the implicits, or some kind of ward generation in general will be great for the boots. So arcane boots are fantastic. Same thing goes for the gloves. Eventually you're going to want ward generation on your gloves. And for the mage relic, the ward generating quill is, in my opinion, the best option for a relic. I do think at some point I'm going to swap off of this relic to a unique relic. I haven't decided which one yet. For the time being, I'm just using resistances with crit chance and int on a quill, because quill is giving us ward per second. And then for the rings, we're just filling out resistances and going dex plus int. This I have a tier, I think that's tier 6. Yeah, tier 6 crit chance with intelligence and some endurance threshold and endurance to help with our damage if we do end up losing all our ward. And then an ivory ring for some ward decay threshold, as well as filling out resistances, and then dex and int. Mana strike scales with int and dex. Dex primarily should be your scaler int should be your scaler, because int also buffs your spells, but then dex does have benefit to mana strike. So you can scale dex at least a little bit if you want to. And then for the idols, the only one that I find really matters is this mana efficiency with Frostclaw and elemental penetration with Frostclaw. That's really powerful. And getting that with increased armor and mana is very good. Honestly, I want a second one of these to put in here, but currently I only have one. And then you're just going to want to fill out resistances, maybe get some vitality off of your idols. And then you want to stack cold res as well in your idols. And the reason why you want to do that is because Drygrass Claw scales crit multi per 5% uncapped cold res. So scaling cold res gives you more crit multi on your lightning blast once you get there. And then for the blessings, the main blessings you want to focus on is getting crit strike avoidance and chance to apply frailty. And then of course we can take like crit strike chance and chance to shred lightning resistance. This endurance threshold should actually be armor, in my opinion. And then again, chance to apply frailty on hit should probably be % increased armor once we can find those. And then once I do the grand blessings, I'll want to turn Winds of Oblivion into more crit chance, or maybe even crit multi if that's an option. And then for the drop rate stuff, the main one you want is dagger drop rate or offhand catalyst drop rate. And then skill shard drop rate is also quite nice. And then for the rest, I have gold drop rate. People that run increased experience on here. People run adorned idol drop rate. Whatever you feel you want. I like the gold drop rate, so we do gold, but you could do whatever you want here. And then again, here it's also whatever you want, whatever you're kind of needing. And that's the build. The build currently feels really comfortable. It is a little on the squishy side, I won't lie to you, but it's also quite good. It can hold its own. It's quite defensive, especially through the campaign. It's very defensive. In the campaign, you'll have almost no problem surviving. But when you get to empowered monoliths, things start to hurt. So you can start to feel it. And that's why I'm starting to focus towards defenses more and go for, like I said, stacking up that Shattered Aegis. And then eventually we're going to want to take the 8 points into Sphere of Protection, get those damage reduction layers going. But yeah, that's about it. I've been rambling for 27 minutes. It'll probably be less when I edit, but thanks for watching. Hopefully this was a good enough description, and I will see you in the next one. All right, peace out.